One of our team members at the Inspired Leaders Network, get him in here, please. I'm going to let you into a little secret. It's his birthday. Now, Ezra's sort of is our most recent member joining the Inspired Leaders Network, and his initiation ceremony was he got himself locked in a lift for 3 hours. Please give Ezra a big happy birthday. Got another question? Come, give me another question. We got a question from as far away Blackpool. Jay Fortune, and basically he's given me a page full of a question, so I'm gonna summarise it. The educational system appears to be only catering for the academic at a time when the emphasis needs to be on the practical. Please discuss. So that's the first one. I'll come to you with that one. I've got a second one. And that was from Jay Fortune in Blackpool. This is Toby Ellison, who's a search consultant. How do the panel think today and tomorrow's teenagers can best prepare themselves to add value and gain value from the workplace? And how can we help them? So can I throw those two out? The first bit is education a little too focused on academia and not something, I think this is alluding to what you're saying, not something a bit more practical? And how do we help today's teenagers where the choices do not seem to be that clear? Views? Sally?
So on the first question around education, I kind of mentioned this earlier. It's quite interesting. I was just talking in the break actually, and we were talking about the fact that there was somebody who was their people around them thought they were ADHD. They got sent off to a psychologist. Psychologist said, not got ADHD, they're just a dancer. As in, when kids are tiny, all of their body is valuable. We kind of celebrate it. They go dancing, they play football, they do all these things.
Nice.
As you get older, we kind of concentrate and the rest of your body becomes irrelevant. Now it's just your head, then it's just your brain, then it's just a bit of your brain. So actually now we're not valuing what you might bring to society, we're valuing this tiny little part of your brain that can operate within the constraints that society has set up on us for what's valuable. And so I think there's almost like a paradigm shift needed around what is valuable, one, and then how do we then equip kids to have those things, and then how do we make sure that that's what school's about? I'm not sure whether testing, GCSEs, A-levels, university degrees do help with what you want in the future. They've been there, and it's almost impossible to imagine unpinning all of that. But if you started with a blank sheet of paper and said, what do kids need in 20 years or 15 years' time, it probably wouldn't be all the things that we've got currently being taught in schools if you started from scratch.
Very good. Simon?
Again, I agree with that. I think we're talking about a model that has been around and we've used for the last 100 years. Is that right for where we're going into the future and what is right for a digital economy? And yet the first leap you make is that, well, therefore it must be technology that I need to be best at doing, and not necessarily so. So I know this is, again, we talked about a lot about empathy. That's very left-hand brain, and yet what we get taught is a lot of right-hand analytical. That's where we've been. So if you start to go to the second question, it almost goes back earlier. It's this encouragement of curiosity. It is drawing more on the experiences of life that you are going through. That's what we need to be bringing out in people, and perhaps just a drawing back from the moment that you leave school or you leave university, you've got to be on that career. There is so much breadth of what you can be doing during your 20s, and both of us have had 2 second or third careers. There is plenty of time out there, and I think there's an impetuosity that is felt, which is fine, it's good. We want to be doing things, we want to be getting on, but yet at the same time, just calm, step back, get some breath.
Very good. Sure.
I think to the point we mentioned earlier on is the idea of degrees and diplomas and PhDs. At some point in time, I think they'll be no longer exist, I suspect. I think now we're looking at a blend between the formal academic and the vocational training that you've talked about. And I think some universities are doing it. I think not necessarily in public funded universities, because the funding model sort of gives you the status quo. But I think if you look at it either in Singapore and in the Far East or in some parts of America, you see that sort of blend happening really well, where you get sort of enough academic rigor to understand what you need to do on a vocational basis, or vice versa. Singularity University is one that I've seen in Silicon Valley, and it's exactly like that. It looks at how do you actually create sustainable sort of lighting. Here's the academic rigor to do it, but more importantly, here's the way to do it.
Very nice.
And they're doing that, I think, more and more as you see around the world. But of course, there's lots of policy changes that need to happen, as we said earlier, and of course, then ultimately, where's people's ambition in that?
Let's take questions from the floor. One here at the front. If I can have your name and your organisation, please, Adam.
Adam Hyland, Inspired Leaders Network. I wondered, as a young person, it's important to find the right fit, but obviously you might not get it first time. So if I enter a company and say give it 2 months and it's not right, should I move on quickly, or should I try and stick it out to see if it works?
So this is a really interesting question from...
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Come and see me tomorrow, Adam. Bring that P45, we'll have that chat. There's no transfer market here. but it's interesting, if Adam's an intern with us. He's done a year at university and he's come to intern with us. And when Adam first came in, when I first met him, he said, Adam, what are your career aspirations? Without flinching, investment banker. I said, why? He looked at me and he said, with that, the sort of ambition of youth, money. Okay. And he's now had the chance to spend some time at Barclays, doing an internship at Barclays, which was great, in their fintech area in Shoreditch. But he also had the opportunity to look inside different cultures with us and see different methods of working. And I'd like to think now that it's not about investment banking. It's more looking at himself. Where am I going to grow most? Where can I add most value? And where does it meet my values and my purpose? As opposed to an esoteric title that didn't really mean anything. Now, but if he does go into the big wide world and he's got an opportunity to go and work with Barclays, if that's not working, what do you do next?
So in terms of making up one's mind, and the 2-month thing, so it's funny, I talk to my people all the time about this, that we're at work quite a lot of the day. And so therefore it's got to be enjoyable. If it's not enjoyable, then really you're in the wrong place. So let's say you get it 4 out of 5 days, you want to get out 8 out of 10 day, okay? So if you go home and you talk to whoever, your goldfish, your dog, your mother, your loved one, and Renee, and you say, I've had a brilliant day, it's 8 out of 10, and you can get that 4 out of 5 days, then that's pretty cool. And that, I'm lucky, I've done that for 33 years, and so that's been pretty good. But it is that thing about finding the fit and do you feel right? And I think the minute you know that it doesn't feel right, it jars with your purpose or your personal values, or it's really boring, and there's no hope of it being less boring, or all those things. The minute you know that, you kind of know that. And that might take someone 2 months, or it might take them a couple of years to kind of actually come to that realisation. But that, for me, is the big test, the acid test. Is, when you go home and you've had 4 out of 5 days where you went home miserable, then it's just not the place to be.
It's your career. Drive that. There's a trite old saying that when there's doubt, there is no doubt, which is kind of what you're saying. And do that, act on it, be confident, because actually in yourself, what you're doing is you're developing yourself and knowing more where you want to be going and what your purpose is, and you're finding that. And you're finding that through making the change, and the change is what most people fear. Most people will sit there doing a 2 out of 5 day for a long period of time and groan about it. Why be in that group?
But I wonder, Sean, and come to you, I wonder now, given the project-based work, Could it not be the organisation? It might be the team. It might be the location. It might even be the boss.
Yeah, I think it's all of that. I think people pick organisations, not the other way around anymore. But I've been incredibly lucky, be it in the military careers or the banking careers I had. I've worked for tremendous bosses, and I've worked with stunning colleagues. And I've had challenges with them and didn't want to go into work for a day or stressed out at a particular thing. But when I look back on it, and even today, I am incredibly lucky to have the opportunities that I've had. But I've picked them, to your point, rather than someone saying, here's what you have to do. And you sort of get maybe a bit more grey and a bit more wise. You can actually say, well, where do I want to navigate my career to? You may never end up in investment banking. But at the end of the day, if you can, the 9 to 5 is so incredibly busy and so stressful. Outside of the 9 to 5, incredibly so as well. The question is, what's the right fit for you? And I think that's, if you can get that sort of idea and say, I actually enjoy going to work, I have a great bunch of colleagues. My boss is okay, but I'm actually developing my career. I think you'll find these natural sort of hooks that you say, you know what, it's time for me to leave, or actually I want to sort of develop my career in a different area in the same organisation.
Very good. Let's take another question, please. One here at the front. Hello. Rooney, what's your organisation?
I work for 10X Banking and I work in HR, and I've got a question for all of you guys, which is, as the HR team at 10X, we definitely agree with the fact that you need to hire for either attitude or the attributions and that side of things. But when you're sat next to your hiring manager who is trying to look for that specific skill set or the domain experience, how do you find the best way to get those on board with what you're looking for instead of focusing so much on the skills that can be taught?
It's a great question, isn't it? This is the never-ending balancing act. We know that we need a deep skill, and we might even be prepared to invest in the lone wolf who doesn't mix with anyone and doesn't want to hunt in packs, or are we going to hold out for and maybe balance out the skills for someone who fits a little better, especially when it's urgent? What do you do?
In my case, I just hire for who can be a team player. Do they have the competencies? They may not have the deep technical expertise. And ultimately, I'd advise sort of the client or the person who's hiring. At the end of it, it's their call. But if I was incredibly unhappy with somebody just because they have technical depth and nothing else, then I say you're not hiring that person. So at some point in time, who's empowered to make the call?
Yes.
You give them as much wisdom as you can. But I always sort of stick to the attitude and the behaviours for me, which is key. Because I don't think they would be in front of you who didn't have certain technical qualifications as a right of entry. So I think the question is, what's the right fit for them as much as for yourselves as well?
So I think there's a slightly different answer to that, which is the skills you'll see from the CV, and you can look to those. But in the interviewing, talk to the person, find out, get them to open up at a level below where they are in the face that they are putting onto you, and through that opening up, that's where you find out what they're really about, and from that you can then build on the conviction. Simple as that.
Very good.
I was going to say, if it's the line manager that's telling you they need the technical skilled person, and you're saying, you're looking for the more holistic sort of, if you like, fit. I think it's about kind of educating the line managers about this kind of thing, because I think it's people tend to do what they've always done. So you need to open their minds up to different ways of thinking about it. So, I'd push back on the line manager that says it's got to be the technical skills, and question it and challenge it.
You want a question there at the back?
So my name is Danola and I work at Goldman Sachs. So we've spoken about what companies are looking for and what skills we should have, but I want to ask, similar to the first question, about what we should be looking for in a workplace. So I've been in finance since I graduated over 2 years ago, and I recently told my boss at Goldman that I'll be leaving soon to pursue a master's in Beijing. And as you said, skills are easily learned, and it's more about culture and attributes. So if you're not sure what you want to do and you're just seeking personal growth, generally, what key attributes should I be looking for in a future job, future employer?
So just help me a little bit. You've got into Goldman Sachs,
Yes.
as blue chip gets. What is it that's encouraging you to go back to education that you're not getting at Goldman Sachs?
I think it's just a lot of things, and I've been doing it for 2.5 years now at FX, and I just think, well, I got an amazing scholarship, and I should just pursue that. As much as I really enjoy my wonderful colleagues and everything, I just...
Of course you do.
I do.
Of
Everyone's
course
really
you do.
fantastic, but
So share with me why Beijing?
Well, I studied economics, and I just feel like it's the biggest trend in the world right now, how fast China's been able to grow, though, slowing down a bit, but still growing very fast. And it's just fascinating to me, and it just seems like a good time. I've kind of been in my baby career of 2.5 years, but I feel like I've seen the industry a bit now, and I just need something new, I think.
And can I ask, what has Goldman's response been to that?
Oh, is anyone from Goldman here?
No. And it's not being filmed, it's not televised, don't worry. You're amongst friends.
Well, I really do think everyone's happy for me to pursue my growth outside of work, definitely.
So can I just give you an answer to that? So
Please.
I think there's a responsibility for whatever organisation it is, that they have to create a kind of gravitational pull for you to want to be a part of them. That you should be looking for that in whatever organisation that you go on to next, and that the more advanced thinking in organisations will say to you, great, go out there. There's every way that they should be able to keep in touch with you so that you come back to them, and you will want to come back to them in 3 years' time when you've done your master's, or in 5 years' time. The technology is there within HR to be able to do these sorts of things now. But at the same time, it's about sentiment and it's about feel, and that's what they've got to give you.
And I have to say, knowing Goldman Sachs quite well myself, I'm quite surprised that they haven't sponsored you and suggested it and made it happen for you. There's a lot of upside for Goldman there.
I kind of did it without telling everyone, and my scholarship is extremely, extremely generous. It includes my flights, my accommodation, my food, everything I'm going to do. So I'm going to work on UK trade relations with China, which I'm really interested in. So I don't think there's any much more they can do if they wanted to.
Spoken like a true Goldman Sachs employee.
You'll be back.
Sally.
So I'd say, how exciting, go do it. And then just think about how long is it for? Just a year. So while you're doing your year, kind of think about what you want to do when you come back, and think about it through different lenses. So maybe you don't want to come back into finance. Maybe you want to go into something that's more akin to what, using the skills that you'll have learned in your masters. Or maybe you want to go into government. Maybe you want to go and influence policy, all sorts of things. Goodness me, the world here will have changed a lot while you've been away. And so it could be quite interesting to come back and see what you do with it, and keep an open mind. But, keep some... I always say to people when they leave, always leave a revolving door if you can. So what you should do is make sure you go talk to them before you walk out the door to check it can revolve if you want it to when you come back.
Sean, it does play to Goldman Sachs are a great employer. There's no doubt about it. But we've got someone who's curious, ambitious, given it a go for 2.5 years, but wants something that's not readily available there.
Yes.
Are we putting a challenge on employers now?
I think you are, and I think it's right that you should, or an individual should, because we're no matter what organisation you're on, Goldman Sachs, they're no longer the only game in town. There's so many different organisations and different cultures coming. This time last year, I think maybe just before Christmas, I was in Goldman Sachs, and I was trying to recruit 10 graduates for our young professional programme in the World Bank, and I had 2 days of people who applied, and that was. From our point of view, is we were getting really top-class talent that was diverse, that had the yearning to apply to the World Bank. And we took 1 out of 11. And the one person out of the 11, I'll never forget, it was the person who said, I want to have a purpose in life. I want to be able to come to work and dream about a world free of poverty. So they had a view that there wasn't this romantic idea of earning lots of money and working in the World Bank. It was the purpose that they wanted. And for us, that was, for me, why would we not want somebody like that who has the all-rounded criteria that we wanted? And for me, it was more about the attitude and behaviour. But they control that, and they control their future. So I think our point of view, you're at the right place at the right time. People stayed on and probably will do very, very well in other careers.
I think it's a real problem, though, because providing education in that workplace is an expense, and kind of when firms are looking at, you know, cutting their cost bases, which a lot of firms are looking at, the question is, where do you cut? And typically, you know, when you kind of think about it, it's quite often internal. The training. It's never internal. Typically, it's the training budgets that kind of tend to suffer,
and the development
and all the rest of it. And so, you know, we've ended up trying to do something that's quite cost effective by using the people within the department to train the other people. But in broader things, they get a coaching qualification while they do it. It's all kind of self-perpetuating, because otherwise you're always at the kind of in that kind of scary place that says, I'm not going to get the money for the training. And I think it's hard, because definitely when I talk to the people, you know, we have this Emerge network, which is all the millennials at Barclays, and I sponsored it for a couple of years. And when I talk to all those guys, what they really, really, really want is an organisation that's going to develop them and train them.
But in a way, Sally, and I'm here with Simon and Sean as well, is we're saying that getting the talent on board is just the beginning. The real challenge is, if you're going to get really top talent on board, then what are you going to do to develop them? It's no longer you've got some resource who's going to work hard for you. The only way you're going to retain them, and our Goldman Sachs colleague here, is stretch them, grow them, ensure that they feel as though they're cared for. There's a route map. There's the project says it's tough, or is it that's the way it should be?
It's tough, but it should be. This is the way it should be. I think it's both. And I think if the people come into organisations, be it Goldman Sachs or a bank or Convitec, and they have a good experience for 3 or 4 years, and they go out and they speak well of the organisation, it's far better than being 20 years there and say, geez, I have 20 years of purgatory. You know, and that happens. I think when you look at most people who have had one career and one sort of avenue, I've got out of jail when I retire. You know, and I'm saying that in a glib way, but I do think that if you can speak well of the organisation, so you had a great experience, I had a phenomenal boss, I had great colleagues, and you go on and build that onto another organisation, I think it's worth its weight in gold.
Let's take another question, please. Whoa, got a few there. Miles, get me one at the front here, and then I'll come to you at the back, Zach.
Thank you. Miles Quinton from IBM. The question I've got is, if automation is going to eliminate a lot of work, what do we need to do so that we are truly inclusive in terms of all capabilities in work, rather than creating division between a professional, adaptable elite and everybody else?
So, if I've heard that right, everyone has a right to an interesting, valued job. It's not just those at the top, it's not just those with the professions. As automation comes in and takes its toll, everyone should look forward to coming to work every day to do something interesting, exciting. But might we change the terms of reference for work? Might we have less days? Might we get rid of the drudgery? Might we... Everyone gets elevated with the rising tide. Views?
I think it's interesting in IBM, because IBM were really sort of at the forefront of work-life balance type of initiative. You just take from the generalist HR view, some of that is actually coming back. But their workforce is very much a workforce that works 24/7 from anywhere, in many cases. I think if you look at certainly the evidence from the World Bank and from the IMF, 26% of all jobs that are currently sort of knowing jobs in the general economy will no longer be jobs in the next 6 years, 7 years. So they'll be gone. So the question is, how do you skill yourself up, and how does automation sort of replace it? I think, though, if you look back over the last 50 years and you look forward for the next 5 or 6, I think you probably see the same level of change, albeit in a shorter time, and technology sort of driving that. And more importantly, I think the aspirations of people have risen across to a level playing field. So this idea of elite you talk about, the aspirations of many people because of technology, be it in Africa, be it in the Rust Belt in America, be it here in the UK, you get a sense that everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing, getting, and more importantly, I want a piece of that. So I think we need policymakers, organisations, CEOs need to create that environment to be able to tap into that in a positive way rather than a negative way. But I do think the ability for education, etc., has to sort of change to go along with what you're suggesting.
So,
a couple of things from that. So, I mean, at its simplest form, it is the race of education versus technology. and trying to get those in as much as you can in parallel. That will be very much, yes, at a state level, but actually even in your own organisation. If you go back to, I mean, there was a shift of IBM had from hardware into software and services, and the former is the one that starts to get milked as you're sort of going to the second, and you're trying to move people across that in order to skill them in a new way. You see, even in a business like, something, you put Netflix up there as for what it is today. That was a video business only 10 years ago, and it's gone through the same thing. So there's some good work that's been done by Bain on this, actually, of where organisations are moving a faster business on one side and then the other, and how they're rotating the people through it. So that helps, and there's an education that comes through that. At a society level, we have to have an infrastructure for a digital economy. And that is as simple as things as broadband capacity, speed, pace, accessibility to that. Education, I made the point earlier about GCSE level maths. In a technology-led world, if they've got that 30% of people who are not qualified at that, in 4 or 5 years' time, they will get left behind. So there is that underlying piece has to be solved by the policymakers, and the organisations can't do that. They can help facilitate it within their own organisations, but they themselves need to be putting that pressure and lobbying governments in order to be able to make that change.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about the math and so technology somehow has to be foundational, like certain other skills, rather than a thing, a profession. It strikes me that technology needs to be a foundational skill rather than a profession, and actually, in some ways, we're pushing against an open door because any young person who's grown up in a digital area already gets that, right? The use of technology, familiarity, is not such a big bridge. So, but I agree with you. I think policy-wise, we need to change our thinking and say familiarity and use of technology is a foundational skill, math, the same kind of thing. And there's no reason why anybody can't learn that to a level necessary to enable them in the workplace.
We talk about millennials still as though it's this new group of people. I mean, I think we're on the tipping point of it being 50% of the workforce.
65% at Barclays.
Yeah, agree.
Wow.
65% of Barclays. But it's an interesting point here that technology should be foundation part. We always said reading, writing, arithmetic, and technology. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think, as somebody who's, let's say, less tech savvy, I already feel the pressure of the things that I don't know how to do. I didn't know when I wrote my first tweet it had to be 140 characters, and then it ran out, and I had to have my daughter come and show me how to do it. And I still feel like a dinosaur. My mother feels even more sort of left out, if you like, and I feel the difference is she kind of just said, I'm not going to learn it, and I feel now I need to learn it. I need to, if you want to stay relevant, you just have to learn it. We were out talking to the CFO at Microsoft, who was a CFO and not really a technologist, and she has had to teach herself technology to be able to do her day job, and she just said, I had to catch up. And I think it's just recognising that has to be, it's kind of there for my daughter. She fully understands how all of this stuff works. I feel like I need to catch her up now.
Very good. I've got James there.
Yeah, James from Silverline. I'm a principal software developer. Two things that kind of came up from the comments in here. One was that teams are becoming more and more agile, that we are forming small teams to do a job very quickly and disposing of that team, I guess, at the end of the job. We certainly see that a lot in software development. And the second one was that human capital is, the bulk of the value of an organization is in the actual workers' human capital. How does that get up to the C-suite? How do we get the upper management to be agile? Because they're manifestly not right now. CEOs, CIO, CTO, they are very staid jobs at the top. How do you break that up and get that agile?
So let's challenge the assumption for a moment. Is it true that at the top, the CEOs have stayed, they're stuck, they're sedentary, Or do we see examples of where the chief executive is as agile as the rest of the organisation?
I think it's both. I think at the end of the day, you're going through this transition to the area that you talk about is actually making sure that this nirvana is within reach. I've seen CEOs, I've seen organizations, I've read about them that essentially the CEO is driving that human capital to actually be more mobile, more agile, and the C-suite can't keep up with them in some respects. I also think that there is organizations with very stuffy hierarchies, and C-suite is something that's up there on the 12th floor and never comes down from that. But at the end of the day, no matter what business you're in, certainly in human resources, this is a people's business. And unless you galvanize the people with a purpose, with a vision, and ultimately make sure that they can grow and develop, then you've sort of lost your currency to be able to manage and lead them, in my view. So that, I actually think when it goes back to the sort of human nature and the value set that most human beings have, I think that's sort of always going to be the true compass for people to follow. And ultimately the experience is, how's that fit with this company vis-a-vis that company? And it does come down to, as you say, the role modelling the leadership at the top.
Can I add something to that from a search point of view? If you go back for 5 years or something ago, just the velocity of change that there has been since then, if I'm doing a search for a new CEO, every CEO who is coming into a job will probably now be asking themselves, how is technology going to transform my business and or my industry, and the chapter that I am going to have in charge of this business, how is it going to be impacted by that? So if that is your starting point, you're having to play by a slightly different set of rules to the way that the command and control has been hitherto, because you've had technology has been there for a long period of time. It's helped automate or it's helped augment what we're doing, but you're moving to a place now where technology is changing things from a cognitive point of view, and that then changes your workforce dynamic. It changes the way that the business is approaching its market, and it's that mindset that as CEOs are having to take on.
Now that's interesting, but are we seeing boards of directors and chairmen looking for, demanding the agile CEO?
More so, yes. I would, yes.
Yes.
And how do they manifest that? Give me a flavour of what they look for, what they ask for.
I think there's an element, we talked earlier about the technical expertise, but I think anybody competing at the CEO suite has that in abundance. They wouldn't be there unless they had it. I think it all comes down to their ability to lead and manage people and to grow people if they want to grow their business, as we said earlier. So I think that is the calling card, and their experience of how they've done that, given some evidence, and of course then the engagement that they have with the individuals.
And that forces you out of the C-suite, the 12th floor, the 31st floor, to go and engage and be visible, and it's very good.
And I think actually, and kind of going on sort of a bit of personal experience here, I think actually the people in the C-suite may have got it, and the people at the kind of the younger people who are in maybe some of the more junior areas of the firm have got it. It's kind of, there's some people that are sort of in the middle who are threatened by the new ways of doing things, by realising they don't have the skills. They can kind of see it coming, and they make the wrong choice of sticking their head in the ground and saying, it's not going to happen to me, I'm just going to stick my head in the ground and not do it. The people that can recognise that they need to change the skills, or they need to change kind of how they go about things and get the skill sets or the ways of doing things that will work in that new world, are being successful. And we talk about this quite a lot. The people I've been working with are very much cognizant of what we need to do, how we need to do it, how do we harness these people, how do we bring the people who've got the new ways of thinking in to talk to the exco and teach them about it. And the people that are probably the ones who won't get through this next 5 years are the ones who are putting their hands over their ears and their hands over their eyes and just assuming it's going to somewhere else, but not them.
Another question over there. John, did you have your hand up? Yes, please.
John Culligan from the Boston Consulting Group. We've spoken a lot about individuals within the workplace, but what is the role for the collective within the workplace, and maybe a step further, even unions, especially as disruption is increasing at such a rate that it is?
We heard this week, didn't we, that Tesco announced, I can't remember, 9,000 jobs were going to be lost, and the unions mobilised immediately. So what is the role of the collective? Is there a collective responsibility for the values, the purpose, the environment we want to work in, employees have become important stakeholders. Simon.
Thanks, Brennan. So importance for the collective, yes, I think all the more so, but yet you have to see how that has to move forward with the change that is taking place too. There is a part in this that I kind of struggle with, which there's a human nature part when it comes back to we're talking about sort of paradigm shift in business of where it was and where it's going to, which is that we've always liked to be able to plan back from an ending that we can see and improve the lot of. The challenge that there is for the collective at the moment is that none of us quite know where all this is going to end up. So there is an openness of mind that is required and needs to be played into positively by the collective, which I would just say is something that needs to be encouraged.
And would you take
different answer? I know.
No, but would you take that as far as it be a staff association, the professional association, the union, some sort of workers' representative, to work with the leadership on what the future could look like, as opposed to having it inflicted on the organisation?
Yes. I mean, so I come back to, again, it's culture. I mean, a formal informality around a dialogue is what you're trying to create within an organisation. And that is less about, well, it's definitely less about hard lines.
Yeah, look, you cannot do it without having some type of process where everybody says, here's where we want to row together. And trade unions are an incredibly important aspect of any sort of infrastructure of an organisation. So I certainly wouldn't sort of drive by consultation and say, here's where we're going. Do you want to hitch on for the ride or not? And that happens, you know, you said it earlier on. I think the most important thing, though, is that one size fits nobody anymore. And I think when you're looking at the collective, you really have to have a proposition that for Sean or for a group of Seans or for a team, and that creates a disparate, which is very hard to control, and of course very hard to get agreement on. So you need a sort of a collective effort when you look at policymakers with trade unions. You look at people who are 65. The whole idea was to have a sustainable pension post 65 or post 67. You know, people are working 70, 75, and they have a huge contribution to make. And it's very hard to put your hands around that in a way that an organisation can sort of contribute to it. So hence the idea of having policymakers to do that. And of course that erodes the value proposition that trade unions traditionally would have played in organisations. So I think they sort of have to get around the corner and see what's happening, as you say, then sort of run hand in glove with organisations and the leadership to do that.
So look, I'm going to take Kimberly, you've had your hand up for some time, Alfie and Paul. Final three questions. So help me here. Let's take the three questions. But let me set up the final remarks here. And I want you to personalise this from your own viewpoints, your own careers. If you look at the career you've had and you look at the future of work, what are the options that face you? What are the options that would face you, given the career choices you've made to date? So let's take these three. Who's got the microphone? Kimberly, please. I'll come to you first.
Hi, my name's Kimberly Davis, and I help people make money from their marketing. My question is, I hear a lot about C-level executives, and I hear a lot about millennials, but it's the Gen Xers that are caught in the in-between who've got another 20 years in their career. And I'm just wondering, I don't exactly know how to format my question, but just to really ask your thoughts about, are they kind of missing out? Are they being forgotten? Should they not be the people who are really getting invested in? Because the millennials have too much time before they get into a leadership position. But what's going to happen the next 20 years are going to happen with the Gen Xers. That's my question.
We're looking at the next generation. We're looking at the perhaps more experienced generation. How about the generation that sits in between that?
So if I kind of, the comment I made about these, you know, this, I think this is this group of people that I was talking about. So I think there's two things. One is that organisations probably have to help those people to think about how to reskill. But the reality is they probably do need to reskill, and they do need to, you know, think about how they can. And there's no, and because a lot of the reskilling is in understanding technology, like, you know, like I need to do to be able to kind of really move forward. I think those of them that are good leaders and have, good people skills will thrive because, we've been saying this evening, this is about actually how do line managers manage people. And so if you have those skills and what you need to do is skill up on the tech side, then I think that's a sort of winning combination. But I think, for the people that haven't been good at managing people and that haven't got the tech skills, they kind of need to really think carefully about how do they keep ahead? Because I think, I just see it getting faster and faster and moving away from us.
Do you feel that businesses are supporting the Gen Xers in doing that?
I think they're waking up to it. I wouldn't say they are everywhere, at every level, in every part of every organisation. I think there are opportunities. I sort of see lots more talk about mobility. Can you move from what you were doing to do something else and be different? And so there are opportunities. But have we really woken up to this, what to do with this group of people that fit into that middle management and a certain age group? Probably not yet.
Alfie?
Oh, my name's Alfie. I work for Track Finance. Basically, we're a fintech company focusing on financial education. And I want to go back to education, really, is we're not taught, schools aren't teaching relevant education. So if the schooling system isn't going to change, how do you think companies should help with that, and how should they promote it and advertise, or do you think they should have a duty of care for their employees and their customers to teach the relevant education?
And themselves.
And themselves,
And
yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, actually, I think that the whole idea of an apprenticeship, which was sort of very vocational based, particularly in the 60s and 70s, I think it has to come back into organisations. In our organisation, we have a big R&D, and it's very, very hard to get the technical skills, but also the more rounded skills. And we are now sort of building it internally. We have no choice. You either buy it off the market, which is very difficult to do, or you build it. And we didn't have the infrastructure in place. We didn't have the financial sort of supports in the development. And I think this idea of the middle, or the missing middle as we call it, we need to be able to sort of galvanise that in a way that can actually bring on these apprenticeships in a way that traditionally gives you the skills and transfers the knowledge across. So easier said than done. I do see some organisations doing it, but certainly in the organisation and medtech companies, I see this idea of an apprenticeship coming back more into vogue, and it's something that I think is quite exciting.
Sure, yeah.
Anything to add?
We were talking in the break about whether we equip people to go into work with the appropriate finance skills for themselves about managing their own finances, and I think there probably is a kind of a need for companies to think about how do they provide that. It's interesting. I even, we had an evening on pensions, and you suddenly realise how few people really understand how a pension works, and yet I kind of work in a bank that's all about finance, etc. And I'm sure that's the case in multiple industries, that we don't necessarily understand about how we manage our finances from leaving school through to retiring. So I think there is something in there, and there's something about whether there's a better partnerships between companies and schools to try and help that as well, particularly the financial sector, which I think could definitely do far more to help within the education system from that perspective.
Perfect, yeah.
Paul, let's have the final question.
Okay, Paul Warrener, coach, but tonight, Matthew, I'm mainly a parent. So we've talked about the employer, the employee, the unions, etc. What role do you think the parent plays in equipping or guiding their youngsters on this navigational path that you've just laid out for us tonight? I have 4 kids, and I have no idea. So I would like all the help I can get. So what role does the parent play in helping?
It's interesting in a rapidly changing world. Parents have the duty of care. They want the best for their kids, but how can they really help?
So, well, I think there's multiple ways, and I have 2 of mine and 2 stepchildren, so I'm kind of 40. There's I think one of the things is around talking to one's kids. My daughter says I'm the only person that telephones, so everyone else is on kind of like something with their fingers. That's the only way anyone communicates. And I have invested masses of time in listening and talking and actually encouraging my children to talk to me in a very open way about all sorts of things. And I think at that point you then create a dialogue, and it is quite scary when I hear other people, you know, who I meet through work or whatever, who don't talk to their kids on a regular basis. Kind of, it's almost like the kid goes up to their room at the end of the day, disappears, and there's electronic stuff in their room, and that's how their child then interacts with the world through this electronic thing. That kind of worries me, and so I feel like I have this duty of care to my kids to make sure that they are connecting with human beings and that they're spending their time doing as much of that as they are having screen time. And then, you know, one worries about the things that are happening. You know, I just watch the stresses upon kids. So for me, it's about keeping my eye on every facet of my kid's life without kind of feeling too draconian.
We all have an unconscious bias. So whether you're vocational or your aspirations are for them to be an investment banker or work at Goldman Sachs or a canoe instructor in Cornwall, you know, I have one of each in every camp. But unconscious bias steers us some way. So the bag you were talking about of experiences could be on the rugby pitch, could be in tennis court,
Absolutely.
could be, you know, in the woodwork shed, could be tidying up the garden.
And none of those are inappropriate, are they?
But that's the point. I'm at that point now in and we all are children of parents who didn't or did give us advice, but we probably will be parents who will be giving advice to those people coming through that you have just now laid out the landscape. There is a definite need, not the employer and not the careers advisor that you think, but I drove my kids around the universities. Why? Because they've not pursued anything that they set out to do because the landscape changes. So as a parent, you're going to be the last port of call for a conversation that says, I'm doing drugs because I don't do well. I have expectations at work that I'm not meeting. I'm going to get fired again. I can't get the job I want. What do I do? So have you got any help for me?
Sure. Dig him out. Dig him out.
I do think the idea of communicating, because, you know, at the end of the day, you'd probably follow, I certainly do, I think, follow what my parents did for me. Give me nice home, plenty of love and care, you know, brought me to school, got a good education, and then sort of set me on my way. So I don't think there's any silver bullet to say, here's the 3 things you must do. I do think, though, that the point that you're talking is about that transition from the home into a sort of formal university or vocational is a piece that's very difficult to navigate because there's so many different sort of voices in that dialogue. But I always think that people traditionally, as you say, always go back home. So, you know, being able to communicate, being able to listen, and ultimately, I think, you know, giving them the sort of the opportunity to set sail, it'll always stand the test of time. So I don't have a magic wand to say. I have 2 daughters, 2 of them in university. Anytime they have a problem, I say, ask your mum. And so I'm probably the worst person in the world to ask.
But it's funny, I have my mother, her father told her in the time when she grew up that she could be a secretary or get married, and that was pretty much all he could think of for her. She wanted to be a horticulturalist, and so she never really realised it. She ran away and became a nurse. With me and my 2 sisters, we were told that the world was our oyster in a funny way, and we were really kind of told to go for it and push for it, and that in a funny way isn't what I'm doing now with my daughter and my son. I'm not doing that. I'm actually trying to get them to pursue something that makes them happy. And I think that there's probably in my generation there's an unhappiness about some of us who were told all that stuff, and it kind of like it came and you got everything and everything was possible and you could be a mum and a wife and this and be successful. Actually, it's bloody hard for that to really happen. And so my view is I just want them to be happy, whatever. And there's no judgment to that. Whatever it is, that would be the best thing. If I've done that, then job done.
Very nice.
So there's a bit of that which is back to grounded and equipped for life, and taking out some of the vocational narrowness that comes into the discussion. And so grounded, stable, secure ability to be able to or want to converse. So trust in you as the parent, and the two-way part of that, I think, is very, very valued. In my own children, who are they're younger, how old are they? 14 and 12. Actually, I feel it's keeping them young longer, keeping them so that they aren't developing too quickly towards the ways that the world is taking them there. So it maintains their creativity in their own mind, so that we're coming back to this left, right-hand side of brain, which I think is all important as you go out into the broader world.
Very nice. So can I come back to
Actually, can I just one other thing? There's a slightly different part of this. So the paradox, in a way, of work, of what do we think of as work at the moment. So I was trying to equate this to someone the other day, that we typically now work in open plan offices where we've taken away all of the walls. We are more plugged in with be it email, be it WhatsApp, be it Slack, whatever that we've got. And yet the only way that we can really find of working through all of that now is putting our headphones on at a desk to create the solitude that we want in order to be able to get on with what we're doing. That's the part for me that we need to address and change. So bringing that communication back into the workplace again, that's what I think that you can bring through in our children. It's really important that we try to do that.
Which Sally highlighted with enabling them to just speak to her.
Yeah.
Not by any technology means we find a bit to speak to her. Let me put down this on the three of you. Your careers, from where you sit now, what does the future of work hold for you? Let me come to you first, Simon. What does the future of work hold for you?
So I'm 3 years into a third career, so at this stage it's excitement, and it's kind of unfolding. Probably I feel a greater sense of freedom, and yet I haven't worked harder, and I'm slightly in that Gen X place of actually where if you don't get on board with the changes that are happening, you will get left behind. So there is I feel an incumbent requirement on myself to upskill slightly, more continuous learning and reading into my subject and around what I'm doing. And from that, actually, back to your point at the beginning, the drudgery kind of goes away, and it is actually getting more exciting as a result.
You took a decision 3 years ago to leave one of the most successful search firms in the world to set up on your own. When you look back, was the timing right? Was it the right decision? How do you feel now 3 years later?
So two comments to that. I think the timing was right, and the balance was that the businesses that I was working with were less big financial services firms, or it was almost imbalanced, big financial services firms, two smaller fintechs and the amount that there were. So as you could see where the tide was flowing, or flowing fastest, and so for the next stage of your career, that was the place where you wanted to be. That was part of that was number one. But the second part of it is actually, it's almost like sort of stepping outside the city walls into the desert and thinking, the first step is, this is going to be dry and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be hard for a long period of time, but you know that you've just got to keep walking. It's only once you get sort of a couple of years out that you can actually start to frame it as a period of transition and say, I've now got my own narrative of where I am from where I was, and therefore the risk was worth taking. That in-between time is very challenging and very hard, and you just got to go for it.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying where I am in London. First time ever living in the UK.
So how long have you been in DC for?
8 years.
8 years
almost
working
8
for the
years.
World Bank.
Yeah, almost
And
8 years.
In the world of development, took a big shift. Come back to Europe, come back to the UK,
Yeah.
back into the private sector. How's it going?
I think okay. I'm still in the job. I think it's exciting because the organisation is going through a lot of change, and being an IPO company 2 years ago to where it needs to be. So that's an interesting opportunity, and it's small enough to get your hands around the whole lot. So it's not just big multinational and you're just doing HR. You're doing as much as you possibly can. And the two things I'm really enjoying is I'm learning loads. So I'm constantly understanding new industries, new business, new people. And the other thing, I'm getting a bit more opportunity to sort of pass on the small bit that I've learned over the last 10, 15, 20 years to people. And I actually think that's a huge, huge obligation in many respects, but an opportunity to here's how we should do it here, here's what I think we should do it, and people develop it and grow as a result of that. So that's what I'm enjoying at the moment, and long may it last.
Very nice. Sally, I've left you till last because you've taken a hell of a decision. So I should let you into this. About 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I was working with Barclays. I was sort of the coach for the group chief executive and the Exco team. And I came across Sally, who was working in the internal audit function. And I looked after the chief internal audit officer as well. He was part of my coaching responsibility. And he was the focused technical brilliance, expertise, command control, just by structure. He ran the whole place by number of audits. And they, professional, effective, really efficient, fun, growth, not quite. So I remember starting to mentor and work with Sally, and I said to Sally, I think you could be the chief internal audit officer, if you remember. She said, no. I'll just carry on doing my, but she had something. And I hope you've tasted the flavour of it today. Leader. Just a very, very special leader. Over time, it wasn't long, was it? It wasn't long. She became the chief internal audit officer, the first female. The first, I think, leader, not technocrat, and has completely reshaped the way Barclays looks at audit. And as I said to you today, an announcement went out that Sally's deciding to retire. What led you to that? What was going through your mind to get to a situation where you're successful, you're one of the most senior female leaders across financial services in the UK? Probably couldn't have gone much better. Why?
All sorts of reasons why. Look, I've had a fabulous, as I put it today in my little note, roller coaster ride through mergers and divestitures and through financial crises of 2008 and through scandals like LIBOR and all of those things. And actually, what's been a real joy, and you were fundamental in making sure that I felt I could stick my head above the parapet and go for the job, we've really got the most amazing group, 650 people, the best people in the world in internal audit, the best audit function. I've been pursuing this hashtag audit is cool because people don't think audit is cool, but seriously, anyone? Goldman Sachs lady, end of your year in China, come talk to Barclays internal audit. There's 2 people in front of you who are there. And the most wonderful group of people. And you know what? It's just, we've got there. And so I guess I thought after 33 years and 5 years doing this, actually, I kind of fancied my year out. I fancy a bit of time off. And then I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to harness the things I'm really passionate about. So I sponsor wellbeing for the whole company. I'm passionate about mental health in the workplace. I think it's a massive problem, and I think it's a massive problem in schools as well, and I think there's something to do with that. I think there's something about purpose. We're seeing now shareholders who want a purpose-led company to invest in, not just a company that's doing well financially. And so I want to kind of go away and play with that whole concept of how does purpose and well-being kind of come together. I'm working with the Lord Mayor of the City of London. I'm hoping that before I leave, I will set on its train a mindful business initiative that people can sign up to across the whole of the city to stop the avoidable stress that we all cause by sending an email at 5:30 on a Friday, pretending we need something by 9 o'clock on a Monday when we clearly don't, and some of the things that happen like that. So that'll be what's coming, and I'm looking forward to it.
So look, we started off looking at the future of work. We talked about the impact of technology, but as ever, we've morphed this conversation around people, around leadership, around culture, which is what the Inspired Leaders Network stands for. Please join me and our 3 fabulous members of the panel, Simon Black, Sean McGrath and Sally Clark. Join me and give them a fabulous round of applause, please.